Hi, this is Christine Paszko, and I'm going to be talking about considerations in selecting a LIMS for the Cannabis Testing Laboratory today. I've been working in LIMS and laboratory automation for over 20 years and really enjoy getting laboratories automated and eliminating many of the mundane tasks so that they can be competitive. Today, we're going to look at some of the regulatory pressures and business pressures that laboratories are facing, along with some technologies that help alleviate some of these pressures in terms of managing all of the laboratory data that laboratories are responsible and required to manage in today's environment, and then also some tools that help them to become more efficient and effective as well as more productive. Let's look at today's agenda. We're going to be looking at what LIMS what is a LIMS? Why are they important? Considerations in selecting a LIMS, as well as technical considerations, looking at the return on investment, cost of ownership, keeping in mind regulatory compliance goals, as well as ISO 17025, GMP, good manufacturing practices, FDA and others, as well as metric integration, and then looking at some of the common features that help laboratories become automated. And then finally, instrument integration, which is a significant time saver, as well as reporting and automated reporting, and also leveraging mobile technology. So this is on tablets in the field to collect data and automatically upload that to the LIMS, followed by a quick summary. A few of the learning objectives for today's presentation include key requirements to examine in selecting a LIMS, including the vendor, the type of support, the technology, the long-term strategy of that organization in terms of technology, and also looking at the role that the LIMS plays in providing the laboratory automation improvements, increasing the efficiency, shortening the turnaround times, enhancing their data quality while maintaining regulatory compliance. And understanding integration benefits. And this isn't just instrument integration. This can also be integration with enterprise applications such as SAP, CRM, as well as some regulatory integration such as metric. And then understanding the impact of automation on the laboratory operations from leveraging positive ID. So this is barcoding, one-dimensional, two-dimensional, as well as RFID, and also automated reporting. And that can be electronic reporting as well as providing paper or PDF reports to clients. Now, if we take a step back and ask, what is a LIMS? A LIMS is a laboratory information management system. It's typically software, though they're all paper-based systems, but they're not as efficient, that manage all of the information, samples, test results, and really everything in the laboratory that goes into the testing. So it includes chemicals, reagents, supplies, expiration dates of those, lot numbers, vendor information, employee training, instrument maintenance, calibration, repair records, everything that's required to facilitate regulatory compliance to the ISO 17025 standard. If we look at LIMS functionality, it begins with the LIMS is the central database where everything is stored. The LIMS basically allows laboratories to track samples as they're logged into the laboratory from sample prep through final disposition and disposal. It allows result entry via off the instrument or manual, quality assurance and quality control, and this includes QC charts, trending, leveraging tablets for bench work where there may not be the room for a PC, or field work if someone is in a field where they need to collect samples and log the GIS coordinates of that field, and maybe take some readings in the field, some soil test or pH test, and then uploading that information to the LIMS. And then finally, reporting, because if you work in the lab, your final output is data. It's a report. It's not a widget, it's the data. And the clearer and more effective that data can be presented, the more successful the laboratory will be. And then some laboratories perform stability testing. So basically, if they have added a compound to a food product, they want to see how long is that food product stable. The LIMS can help in this scenario by allowing sample scheduling to be pre-logged into the LIMS and reminders sent out so that analysts know when they need to pull a sample for testing. And then we previously talked about chemical inventory as well as resource management, having web portals where customers have the ability to access their data 24/7, integration with Metric, which is for regulatory compliance, having electronic notebooks, also be able to export data into the LIMS, so that the LIMS is basically the master database where all the information is housed. All right, why are LIMS critical? Well, the first thing is they can really reduce data entry errors. I've been in laboratories that don't have LIMS, and frequently they're doing data entry multiple times. That's not efficient, and it's also very error prone, especially from a transcription error standpoint. Increasing automation increases traceability. You can see who did what when. There's an audit trail for any changes to validated and approved results, along with a reason. So if a result is changed, an auditor wants to understand why was that change made, and again, what was the reason and what was the original result and who entered the original result. And they also like to see the date and timestamps. Within a LIMS, you can actually assign privileges and permissions such that different people in the laboratory will have privileges to different functions and features in the LIMS. And with those functions and features, they'll have different permissions. And then finally, you'll have an electronic tool to manage all aspects of laboratory information. Now, there are many new cannabis testing laboratories that are being constructed. If we look at what is required, the first thing is to obtain a new building or facility or secure one that's already in place. Hire and train qualified scientists, chemists, microbiologists that are very well versed in the requirements of the International Standard Organization 17025, which pertains to laboratories. Being able to purchase and validate instruments. A number of different vendors that supply similar instruments, so being able to do your due diligence to determine which instrument best meets your needs, and also to develop and validate methods. Author SOPs, standard operating procedures, and train staff on them. One of the other benefits of LIMS is that you actually have the ability to link your SOP onto the LIMS, so that if a user logs in with their username and password and pulls up a test, they actually can see work instructions or SOPs for that specific test. Users also need to be trained on Metric, and they need to receive their Metric API keys before, or API licenses before they can even begin to use Metric. They have to develop a state-approved certificate of analysis report, and then submit all that information to the state for approval and licensing, whether it's for medicinal or recreational, before they can even begin testing any product in their laboratory. And then also scheduling and passing their ISO 17025 audit. Now, if we look at some of the market drivers for LIMS, we can see it's basically to have secure data management as well as securely manage that product throughout the laboratory. So if you have a kilo of cannabis and you use a portion of that for testing, regulators want to understand where the rest of that's being stored, how much is being used, how much is used up, how much is left on hand, and how much is ready for disposal. So it's very important to have that traceability or internal chain of custody with the laboratory's LIMS system. So not only do you have increased efficiency and data security, but you also have standardization in that you have assurance that everyone using your system is following the same SOPs, has the same setup. And this is especially true when you have multiple laboratory sites. And we're seeing that more and more, where clients will have operations in North America as well as South America, Europe, and Asia. So it's very important to have standardization in business. We've previously touched on regulatory compliance. Whether laboratories are doing cannabis growing, whether they're doing final product testing, whether they're involved with food manufacturing and testing additives in food. There's different regulations that come into play, so it's important to understand what you're planning on doing and what regulations will cover your scope of work. LIMS provide organizations with a strong competitive advantage, and also it helps communication across the organization. I know when I worked in the laboratory, people were always, looking for samples, and again, it's not foolproof. Samples need to be put into the LIMS to be able to find them, but being able to look up test results without having to find the person that ran the test it's a huge advantage. And then finally, we touched on globalization imperatives. LIMS is really a mission-critical tool for the laboratory. Everything from the minute the samples hit the door, sample tracking, chain of custody, and inventory control was the internal chain of custody, from data entry and reporting, creating QC batches, QA/QC work lists, looking at trends, instrument integration. I know we've got a library of over 550 different instruments that we've interfaced already, looking at shelf life studies or stability studies, chemical inventory, proficiency testing. These are tests that the state or whoever your regulating body is, typically they send laboratory blind samples and they ask you to analyze them because they've tested them and there's a known amount of compound in there, and they want to see if you also are able to get the results similar to theirs. Employee training is also tracked under ISO, and they're also looking at, in the training records, having tests to prove that the training was effective, documenting instrument maintenance, repair, as well as calibrations, noting when calibrations are next due, not allowing testing to be done on an instrument that's out of calibration, also looking at things such as preventive and corrective and preventative actions, CAPAs. The CRM module allows clients to keep track of any complaints against the laboratory. If any testing was complete and perhaps a report was missing, a page was missing from a final report sent to a client, those all need to be tracked, analyzed, and remediated. And then finally, reporting, reporting to metric, reporting to clients, reporting invoices, and then having internal reports such as work list reports or management reports, backlog, production. And then finally, electronic data exchange, where you may be working with other organizations that want to import those results into their system. We talked a little bit about metric. It's basically a regulatory compliance system built by regulators for oversight, and it provides necessary visibility for adherence to the rules, regulations, and statuses. It has both an industry side as well as a regulatory side. The industry side is used to report required events and information, while the regulatory side is used for enforcement and compliance monitoring. So that is something very important for many states. We talked about production through analysis. Many laboratories focus on one type of testing, whether it's just like contract commercial testing, where they receive product, be it food products for testing, or raw material. Maybe it's just the powder or the leaves or the plant. So depending on what is received to the laboratory, they'll have to do sample prep and then analyze it, whatever product they receive. So keep in mind that some organizations will have operations where it's kind of like farm to final product. Well, they'll grow it, they'll purify it, and then they'll convert it to the final product, whether it be in medicinals or lotions or even edibles. So there's always testing at every step of the way. People always ask, well, what do cannabis laboratories actually test for? Well, they test for quite a bit. Just high-level overview, they test for pesticides, mycotoxins, they test for bacteria such as E. coli, because the last thing you want to do in a dispensary where you're providing medicinal cannabis is get someone ill from a contaminant in the product. They also test for potency as well as solvents, checking to see if any foreign material is in the product, any heavy metals, water activity that impacts the shelf life. So there's quite a bit of testing that's done. Navigating the LIMS market. So looking at the LIMS market, it's really important to understand the different technologies. There's some software packages that use much older language. There's some that use newer or open source, and there's pros and cons to each. So it's important to understand the language that the software that you're considering was written in, understanding if a perhaps only have a cloud delivery as software as a service, or if it's something that you can buy and install on your premise. When it's software as a service, you're basically leasing it. When it's a premise software, you typically purchase it. You see a lot of software companies moving to the cloud as a kind of leased service. You want to also look at the reporting tools used, because remember, if you're in the laboratory, your final product is a report, and you want to make sure that the reporting tools are flexible and easy to use. And then you also want to look at the solution and see if it's configurable, because it's much easier to configure a solution with the tools that are provided by the vendor than to customize. If you customize software, you can actually customize yourself into software that can never be upgraded, and that's something that you want to avoid. So remember, configuration is always better over customization. The only things that should ever be customized are reports, because they'll be unique to your laboratory, and instrument integration, because every instrument has a unique output file. And then also look at the vendor support hours. Is the support outside of the country, or is it inside the country? Is it the hours that your laboratory does business in? And also what services are offered. Ensuring that the system is future-proof basically just means that if you add anything to the software, or if you configure anything, you're not preventing yourself from getting a future update. And one of the most important factors, I believe, is the ease of use, the usability. Is the software easy to navigate, or is it really confusing and very difficult to learn? So all these factors go into understanding the return on investment. How quickly can you deploy the software, and how quickly can users begin to use it and see the benefits? This slide, I realize, has a lot of information on it, but basically it's just showing that you can have dashboards, you can have barcode scanning or RFID, you can have manual data entry, you can print out reports manually, you can do scheduling, you can generate chain of custodies as well as certificate of analysis. The scheduling can also be used for stability studies, and then you can have instrument integration, and you can have automated backups. And then in the cloud, you can actually have clients that use a web portal to check on the status of their test results. And if the testing has been complete, they actually have the ability to download the test results and download a PDF of the final report. Maybe it's a C of A, or it's a final analysis report, or even an invoice. And then also the ability to use tablets in the field where it leverages Wi-Fi, 4G, or 5G, and then you can basically upload the GPS data, the GIS coordinates, to the LIMS along with any test results that you have. So it's really looking at the total solution. Now, if we look at this total solution again, it can actually be deployed on-premise or via the web. So if we look at, premise-based solutions, there's a number of pros and cons to each. And, one of the major pros is that the users are close to their data. You don't have to pay the monthly service charges because all of your costs are upfront. So that can be a con because it's a large capital outlay initially. Whereas software as a service, if you don't have the resources to have a full-time IT staff to manage the software, the servers, the network, the firewalls, you don't have to have that investment all at once. You can just have a monthly fee. And I'm not going to read all of the pros and cons, but I just wanted to present that there's advantages and disadvantages to each. And it really depends on your own situation as to which is going to work best for your laboratory. Looking at sample tracking and inventory control, it's very important, especially for high throughput laboratories, to move samples through the laboratory very quickly. And login and reporting are two bottlenecks that people face. So looking at bench sheets, they can be barcoded to quickly log in samples. The internal chain of custody can be moved along by just scanning samples. Barcodes and scanners, RFID, they're all very efficient, very quick, very accurate, and they just make sense in making sure that you have tight control over the samples that are entering your laboratory and leaving them, because you can scan them out for disposal. Key features in the internal chain of custody for a LIMS, a controlled substance sample inventory. Laboratories the test controlled substances have to have this internal chain of custody. They want to manage the transaction, the quantity, the units, who performed the login, who performed the prep, who performed the analysis, when they were disposed, how much was disposed, any comments, inventory by location, by type, and how much time they spent in storage. So again, it's all about control. An integrated sample inventory workflow with the ability to manage the required controlled substances is critical to cannabis labs. And many, many labs leverage LIMS to make sure that they have this control in place. And this is one of the things that the auditors look at as well. More and more laboratories rely on KPIs, or key performance indicators. And having a dashboard at their fingertip is very helpful in terms of, how many tests are in-house currently, how many tests are on the backlog report, what's our largest test, what's our cost per test. You can monitor your fridges and your refrigerators, your freezers, your incubators. There's just so many things that you can monitor in real time, all in one spot, that makes the laboratory more effective. Next, we'll look at data entry and reporting. And here you can see that batch order login, being able to log in a large number of samples at once is very effective. Rapid accessioning, we already talked about leveraging barcoding for that, or RFID. Having reports automatically printed, such as your certificate of analysis or your invoice report, they can be sent to the web portal for clients to access 24/7. And the beauty is that clients use their time, their resources, so that the laboratory can focus on more analysis and doing more work. We briefly touched on instrument integration earlier, and this is just a huge advantage for laboratories. Not only does it increase the accuracy of the data, but it also avoids duplicate data entry. It enhances your productivity. Laboratories typically achieve their return on investment within a year, but it's probably closer to 9 months. It's based completely on your sample volume. I've seen ROIs as quick as 2 to 3 months. So again, it's really based on your throughput. Look at how many instruments the vendor has experience integrating, because this is really a significant part of any LIMS deployment, is the integration with not just instruments, but also other enterprise applications. Now, if we look at how instrument integration works, instruments typically export their results in a number of different formats, whether it's a CSV, an Excel, text, ASCII, XML, a web service, or if you just want to export from one database to another database. And they can also import contract lab data so that everything is going into the LIMS. Some instruments, some of the more modern instruments, allow a work list to be sent from the LIMS to the instrument. The instrument will run all the samples and then send that completed work list back to the LIMS. And the beauty is it's very fast, it's very accurate, and there's no human involvement other than loading the samples on the tray. And then there's an error log if anything wasn't imported correctly that you can view. But it's quick and easy with leveraging barcodes and instrument integration in terms of saving time and becoming more efficient. Okay, QA, QC, and trending. You can actually set up data qualifiers in the LIMS as well as limits, so that if any result falls outside the limits, it can be automatically highlighted on screen the minute the data is coming off the instrument or the minute the analyst has entered in a result. You can view the data with QC charts. You can also do statistical process control charts. We have integration with JMP software from SAS, so you can look at some very interesting trends in data that may not be apparent otherwise. Being able to report, as we mentioned previously, is huge in laboratories that do cannabis testing, because this is their final product. So having canned reports already complete in the system that they can basically add their logo to and use right out of the box will save the laboratory a lot of time and resources. You can also digitize signatures and link that to a user's username and password. So once the supervisor has validated and approved the results, they can automatically print out the report and email it to one of their clients. Another really nice feature is a web portal that links to the LIMS that allows external customers access to the data in real time. So 24/7, they can log on, they can print out a C of A that's a PDF, they can look at electronic data deliverables, EDDs, they can look at invoices, any images that you're interested in having attached. So there's a lot of power and flexibility in having that data available. We talked a little bit about tablets, having tablets in the field so that you can basically document the sampling site by the GIS coordinates. That really reduces the amount of paper, the carbon footprint, and it just also is significant in reduction of cost, because if paper forms are used in the field, those typically have to be brought back into the laboratory and transcribed into some electronic format. So having that mobile technology be a window into the LIMS really helps to reduce transcription errors as well as paperwork. At the end of the day, it's really about standardization, quality data, efficiency, traceability, having regulatory compliance to make laboratories bulletproof for their ISO 17025 audits, speed, metrics, reliability, repeatability, visibility, being able to share information with others in your organization, and working more intelligently. Because the people that are working in the cannabis testing labs, they're all highly educated scientists, chemists, microbiologists, and the more you can eliminate the mundane task from their workload, the more effective they can be in terms of growing the business and focusing on the chemistry. Few benefits of automation. Simplifying the report generation because it's automated with templates, ensuring regulatory compliance, allowing analysts to have work list and scheduling for stability studies. Instrument calibration can be tracked, as well as employee certifications and trainings. Instrument interfaces accelerate data results delivery to the final customer. You can have better control over your inventory as well as your employee training and CAPA management, better customer service because you can become more efficient and have better quality control on your internal data. You have access to advanced analytics and tracking with QA/QC. The electronic chain of custody saves paper and time. And then also being able to send automated email alerts and have all the data in the data warehouse. So within the web portal, you have an exact copy of every report that was sent to any client so that you always have that readily accessible. Summary, the right LIMS is critical for today's state-of-the-art cannabis testing laboratory, making sure that you have the right tools and leveraging the best technology that includes positive ID, sophisticated LIMS that are extremely powerful in helping manage and grow businesses. Many also have integration with your accounting package so that you can be assured that everything that's logged in will be billed. Understanding the differences and the pros and cons between premise and cloud. Eliminating all the mundane tasks, label creation, instrument integration. Like if you didn't have the instruments interface, someone would have to basically enter the results by hand. So having that all electronic is a huge time saving, as well as automating the electronic reporting to Metric and other agencies. And then it basically also accelerates communication across your organization such that if you need to share data with others, you can basically send people copies of the data. They can actually access the system and also see where samples are within the system. The ROI is very quick for laboratories, typically under a year. And then also you're facilitating your regulatory compliance. Windows authentication is also important, CFR 21 Part 11 compliance, being able to have things like temperature monitoring integrated in your LIMS. So instead of having each refrigerator and freezer incubator monitored manually every day, you can secure a product that will monitor that 24/7 and have that data be linked in the LIMS or displayed in the LIMS as well. And then making sure that you have a very strong internal chain of custody and audit trail for your auditors and also for your internal team members. If anyone's interested in additional information, there's a paper that was published last year in American Laboratory We'll be happy to send that. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their time and attention today. Have a great day.